From the St. Francis Yacht Club in San Francisco, this is the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, hosted by Ron Young.
Welcome to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon. We hope that you and your family are safe and ensconced in a comfortable environment, and we're almost to the end of this horrid pandemic. In the meantime, we're going to continue using Zoom technology to bring our guests to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon audience. Today, our guest is a well-known, super accomplished sailor whose dual roles as executive director and skipper on American Magic provide him with tons of valuable information for the rest of the sailing world, especially America's Cup aficionados. Those of us who've been part of management of America's Cup campaigns know that every AC is a full-time gig. Those of us who've sailed on America's Cup boats know that that's a separate full-time gig. To be able to do both is a genuine full plate. Our speaker today has done a great job in those roles, starting as a four-time collegiate All-American, winning 11 world championships, racing on hot rides all around the world. Our speaker today is joining us from a hotel room in Newport, Rhode Island, just before sailing a beautiful boat in Rock Island. Welcome to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, Terry Hutchinson.
Thanks, Ron. And thank you very much to the St. Francis Yacht Club for having me today. It's a privilege to be able to speak about American Magic. Having had the opportunity in 2000 to represent the United States and to also represent St. Francis Yacht Club in my first America's Cup, it's always special to come and be a part of this illustrious group of which you lead. And you have the opportunity to speak to the membership. Sitting here in Newport, Rhode Island, and spending time yesterday in Harbor Court, sitting up on the hill overlooking, beautiful Newport Harbor. There's really only one other club in the world that has the same type of view, and that's St. Francis. And knowing the time that I lived in Mill Valley for the 4 years that we were there as our family through 2013, and then even after when we chose to stay in Mill Valley, that part of the world and that part of California is just a beautiful and unique spot. So I feel very privileged to be with you all today. As you rightfully point out, I have a bit of a brief discussion about American Magic. It's probably pretty difficult to encompass the last almost 4 years of work into an hour. And so what I'll show today is kind of a step-by-step history of American Magic, of what we did really through the development of our three boats, starting with the Mule, going to boat one in Defiant, and then ending up with Patriot, which is the boat that we raced in the Challenger Selection Series, and a bit of a video and debrief from that faithful day, which is one of those certainly that what doesn't kill you will make you stronger. Unfortunately, none of that happened, and we've come out of it stronger and learning how to get better.
Good looking screen, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. So as Ron has said, for the last 4 years, I was a skipper and executive director for New York Yacht Club American Magic. In essence, the team was developed out of the two racing programs, Bellamente, which is owned by Hap Falf, and Quantum Racing, which is owned by Doug DeVos. Over the course of time, we partnered really with the New York Yacht Club and also with Roger Penske, the most successful car racer in U.S. history, and certainly has been dominant in that field. For me personally, it was an incredible opportunity to work not only with and for Hap and Doug, but also Mr. Penske, and to represent the New York Yacht Club. In some ways, it felt like the perfect culmination and the first perfect coming together of this group of people. The club's history inside the America's Cup is undisputed. And I think as I reflect back and realize the importance of that, and having had the opportunity really to spend some time at the clubhouse on 44th Street and understanding the meaning of the deed of gift, which is this wonderful document that's, if you think about the amount of money and the time and the energy and the effort that's gone into chasing the America's Cup by titans of industry for the better part of almost 200 years, it's truly impressive that it's written on a couple pieces of paper, front and back. And, the true essence of the competition, I wonder if when the original writers of that document, if they conceived exactly what the America's Cup would become. as you were describing, my roles within American Magic as a sailor and also helping lead the organization, in retrospect, I'm really glad that I wasn't riding around in a chase boat, because there are no words that describe these boats. The power that they produce, the speed that they produce. Last week we were out racing Bellamente around the island in the New York Yacht Club regatta, and Hap said, Terry, how fast would the AC75 be going? And we were going upwind about 16 knots, and Bella's sitting on about 11.1. And I said, well, Hap, you only got about 25 knots to build. And it's not an exaggeration. You're in 16 knots of breeze, you're looking for 36, 37 knots of boat speed going upwind, and downwind, your only limitation is the cavitation speed of the foils. So they truly are impressive pieces of equipment. And, looking ahead, I think from an American Magic perspective, the team is waiting and trying to be patient, allowing the defender the opportunity to get the next event sorted. Obviously, sitting here today, there's been a lot of discussion about the venue and what's going to happen there. Team New Zealand and the New Zealand government just announced that they're not at a spot where they feel like they can responsibly defend the cup. And I'm, incredibly sympathetic to both those positions, because the New Zealand government has supported Team New Zealand. My experience with Team New Zealand in 2007, was the first introduction of the government support into the team. And they've been a wonderful backer and a wonderful promoter of the sport of sailing. Team New Zealand, for their part, they have the responsibility to defend. And the one thing for certain is that organizing one of these teams and running a event, neither one of those can be done in a compromised fashion. I think what you can see is they're both well intended to try to have the best event, but they're also, the priority of the defenders to win the regatta. So it'll be interesting to see what comes up.
Also, we have to pay some tribute to the fact that this particular cup defense did not provide the economic reward that usual in previous cup defenses provided. When Alan Bond won in '83, they claimed they got $1.2 billion of economic impact to Australia by their defense. Yeah. And we all know that everything was so mitigated by COVID that New Zealand couldn't have gotten anything close to as much as they hoped to get. And that's quite a challenge these days. Most people don't realize that the America's Cup is one of those games where if you win the game, you get the game. You get to win it back to your defense venue. We all understand what's going on with them, saying it's going to be a tough economic issue for them to host again.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. And so, we'll see what happens. I'm confident that there is aligned goals in both the New Zealand government and inside Team New Zealand and inside the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron. The three main principles there see things very similarly. And, at the end of the day, as a sailor, from an American Magic perspective, I think really what we just want to know is tell us where the regatta is going to be, tell us the rules, and let us get on with developing the fastest AC75 that we possibly can.
3, 2, 1. Here we go. Go, 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 go. When you start from a high place, there's only one way to go, and that's even higher.
There's significant pressure to make sure that we're getting the most out of this boat at all times. Each group needs to be able to forgive each other when they make a mistake, and they need to be willing to allow mistakes to happen so that we can make progress. It's not always going to be a perfect, straightforward path.
Every single day that we go out there, I feel like that we have something to prove.
Get up any time, any right? Yep, yep. In the America's Cup, you've got to work smarter, but you've also got to work harder. There's a commonality. Everybody wants to win it really badly.
have to attack it. You can't just react.
3, 2, 1, here we go.
It sounds like a long campaign, 4 years, but it feels like you're always up against the time limit.
Good angle, D, no lower.
Our time is when we get to line up with another boat and the gun goes off.
Gives everybody a bit of a taste of what Patriot was like to sail. It's fun to hear the voices of the team members, to hear Andrew Campbell talk about how quick 4 years goes by and how much we always felt like we were up against the clock. And in retrospect, I think some of the things that the team did really, really well, understanding that we came together while we were very experienced as a group of individuals in different aspects of the sport, and we still had to get the team to come together under the same umbrella. Out of this came the Mule, and the Mule was our 50% scaled test boat. Now, in the very beginning of American Magic, knowing that we didn't have necessarily the IP from a design perspective that certainly Ineos, Team New Zealand, or Luna Rossa had with their previous experiences and the developments of virtual boats, the Mule seemed like a real good way to get the sailors out of the water, to get the designers interacting with the sailors, and to get the program really up and running, to see how all this was going to go and to see really if the concept was going to work. In, I think it was April of 2019, the Mule was conceived. And by the fall of that year, we had launched the boat to go sailing. In between that time, one of the benefits that had happened to American Magic in particular, because we were the only team sailing a full-scale Mule at the time, was there was an issue with the foil arms that were produced for the fleet of AC75s. When they built the first one and structurally tested it, the arm failed quite a bit below the safety factors. And so what that actually allowed for was 5 months more sailing in the Mule as a team to kind of develop and continue to develop really our interactions and how things were going on the water and in the design of certain parts of the AC75. We used the Mule a lot to test and develop concepts that we used in our foils. I think in retrospect, when I look back at it, the next evolution of the Mule is developing also the virtual platform. Nothing like ending with the lawn dart. It's fun to watch that video because you can see a lot of the development. And early on in that video, you can see how the boats, the riding of the boat and the flying of the boat is a little bit inconsistent. And towards the end, except for maybe the lawn dart there, which we were working on some of the computer logic and flying the boat that maybe wasn't happening just perfectly, you can see a quick evolution of how the sailors, and I can certainly see features in the mule as well, that I know there was an evolution taking place all the way through, which inevitably, when we did the mule, you kind of had to think, well, what's the goal outside of all the other intangibles that I was talking about earlier? Well, the goal has to be to make it that when you go and you launch your boat one, and we launched Defiant, that straight away we're into foiling, and straight away we're into development operation. That was towards the end of the mule's life, that last piece of video. And without question, she did everything and then some for us. We always kind of joke, the first day that we sailed the mule that we capsized, the last day that we sailed the mule we capsized. When you get into something like this, I think our top speed in the mule was 44 knots on a 38-foot boat. And when you get into that environment, things are happening pretty quickly, but also on the smaller boat at that speed, the senses are much more engaged than they were on the 75. In the 75, we were all a bit lower in the boat. You just didn't get that same sense of speed. You had to really just look down at the boat speed number to see really how fast you were going.
What was your top speed on the 75?
54.7.
What point of sail?
What point of sail? We were bearing away around the mark in about 27 knots of breeze.
Also, the development cycle, as you know, every time there's a new design introduced, there's this upward learning curve. But the idea that we'll now keep the same design parameters for like 4 years, or 4 cup cycles, or not 4 years, 4 cup cycles.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Well, I think you're spot on. I mean, I think what we're going to see, and we've already had one rule session with the Defender and the 3 challengers that were in AC36, and all the discussion points that they're considering and talking about are areas just to make the boat slightly more user friendly, be able to sail the boat aggressively with less people, so a bit more battery power, which will help reduce some of the operational costs of the program. And then they're talking about how to, because the boats initially were designed to be self-righting, but as we all saw, we capsized twice, the Defender capsized 3 times, and at any of those times, and the boat wasn't self-righting. So they're talking about adjusting that side of the rule, maybe make the boats a little bit lighter, give away some of that self-righting. Still, if the boat was to capsize, it's not going to go turtle, which you want to avoid like the plague. What we have here is Defiant, which was American Magic's boat 1. The way the competition evolved, us and Ineos didn't get the class rule for about 9 months after both Team New Zealand and Luna Rossa had the rule. And so what you saw in both of our teams was an exploration in a corner of the box that for American Magic, Marcelino felt strong was an important spot to explore. In the end, obviously, we gravitated away from this concept. And as the boats evolved and you quickly gained a more understanding, you just realized that Defiant was a great testing platform for us, but she was never going to be anywhere close to where Patriot was, or really the second generation of boats. Defiant was, for us, a perfect test boat. We did everything from catcher on fire to almost sinker, and we did some great sailing in between. But what you quickly realized with the boat too was how much more powerful the 75 was than the mule, and in that light, it was a really good test platform for us. From Defiant to Patriot, we spent 66 days sailing Defiant over the course of basically 11 months. And that include 2 moves, that include not sailing in COVID. And, really our first training block in Defiant was, October through the end of May, October of 19 through the end of May of 2020. And in that period of time, obviously, we had the limitations where we shut the sailing operation down for a month out of respect for what was going on in the country and the tragedy that was unfolding with the pandemic. But a lot of the things that we did inside of Defiant really made Patriot a much better boat. We knew from the get-go that the time that both the Defender and the Challenger of record had, that Patriot needed to be not a second generation boat. It almost needed to be a third generation boat. And the similarities, I think, in what you see in some of the design features of Patriot, in particular, when compared to the Defender. Obviously, the Defender carried their hull bustle down the middle in a much different way and did a nice job, really, of addressing the aerodynamic side of the platform. But Patriot, in her own right, addressed a lot of those areas as well. And the crew was nice and low in the boat. When we were straight lining or racing and you knew you weren't going to be maneuvering for a bit, everybody was down low. And the only two people in the air really were Andrew and Dean. So in that regard, Patriot really was a great evolution of Defiant. The video that I'm going to show here is there's a couple good moments in it. The first one is when you see the boat do a nosedive, and that was literally about 15 minutes into her life, where we'd borne away, the breeze, we'd hoisted sails, the whole goal was nice light sea trial here, nothing too extreme. And we get up towards the port and we're in about 22, 23 knots of breeze. And we'd sailed in a lot of breeze and the boat was going well. And so we thought, well, we'll just bear away here and go downwind. Everything's good with the bear away. We go downwind and we go into the first jibe and it got a little bit loose. The thing that was impressive through all of this was when we lined the science up with what we thought the boat was going to do and the evolution really of the VPP program through the course of the campaign, how well Patriot performed when compared to the science. And a lot of this work had to be done, without a virtual boat for development because we didn't have that IP. And this is a great shot. I love this shot because it gives a great comparison of the aerodynamics of Patriot's hull versus the Defender's hull.
Race 4 of the day served up the most exciting action. Emirates Team New Zealand struggled in the opening legs, giving American Magic a big lead of up to 400 metres. In the final upwind, Emirates Team New Zealand soon found their groove and started attacking the lead of American Magic. After a number of tacks in close succession, they were putting a lot of pressure on American Magic and found the overlap at the final top mark, taking the lead and drawing the penalty. But a bad jibe after the top mark found the Kiwis back in the water once again, handing the lead back to Dean Barker and the American Magic, who took 2 wins for the day and now lead the World Series event.
It was fun to see, when we got into the racing, we'd spent 3 years developing. And so that Christmas Cup regatta, you could feel across the viaduct, you could feel the tension as if you were walking into the harbor and there was this wall of tension and resistance because all the teams were really on edge and, so much work had been done to get to that point. I think for American Magic, it was good to see that we had gotten to a good spot with the boat. And we knew that through the course of it, we were going to have to continue with that progression and that development. In retrospect, when I look at the Challenger Selection Series, the first day of racing there, we had a pretty strong call to start to Lured Avignos and go right into North Head from the windward position. And Mother Nature, wasn't perfect for us on the beat. And our mistake there was just not following around the right-hand mark because the course became a bit of a progression. The next day of racing on Saturday was really light, and it definitely exposed the vulnerabilities of our boat from a team perspective. When we designed Patriot and the systems and the sails and all the setup, we were targeting a very specific 8 to 14 knot wind range, and knew that we would be vulnerable at the bottom end of the wind limits for the protocol. And in essence, on both those days, the first race, we came off the foils, but got back into the race and sailed back into the lead. And the Luna Rossa did a good job of getting up on the foil. And once they got up, they were able to connect a couple dots. And at that point, then it was about making the time limit. And again, the same in the second race against Ineos, where they made the time limit by a minute, but it was just about connecting the dots. And it was very clear where we were vulnerable. And so we were going to have to continue to improve upon that. On that Sunday, the day that we tipped over, I think we were seeing the true performance of the boat versus Luna Rossa. But the rest is kind of, I think Mother Nature had another idea for us. Call it a bit self-imposed as well. So what you have here is a little bit of, it's a bit of a longer video about what happened on day 4 of the Challenger Selection Series and kind of the aftermath of the recovery, and gives, from a team perspective, some of the things that we were going through on that day.
Going into that one. Wow.
Racing against Luna Rossa today in the second round robin. It's fully in the cards to be able to win this one. So win this race gets us that good momentum and sets us up to keep winning and carry on. What I like about this team is that every day we go on the water, it's the same attitude, same kind of mode of operation that we always have. So whether we come off after winning twice or losing twice, it's the same, and we set ourselves up, to just keep doing what we know how to do. Should see more breeze today, which is definitely something the Patriot likes. So, we all love it, sailing more breeze, boats go a bit faster, and you spend more time, foiling instead of wishing you were foiling. So it should be all on today.
Full speed, go, 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 and we are underway. American Magic looks strong today.
To me, it looks like they've got wheels. They've got a little bit of extra, both upwind and downwind.
They are steaming on this race course. American Magic looking hopefully for their first win. American Magic flying into that gate for the final time. And they were phenomenal. Squall here. American Magic. Oh, Dusty, go, 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 go.
And they are over.
No, they're in.
That's a fucking big pump. You can hear the elevated voices going into that one.
No rush.
Wow.
Stand by taxi.
Oh my God, the boat turns sideways.
Take any advice here from Chase 1 or Chase 2.
Everybody down in the back, please. Justin, go forward, go forward.
They come forward, fellas, in case it's my line race.
That's coming. Keep coming. Okay, so Kano, this is going to be a potential manual for you. I'll stay with you. Screw this big down You go forward, slowly, don't speed. Reset and get forward until it's slightly up. Okay, guys, keep on outside, so please, so we can get on your side. Okay, there's a big hole in the boat. We just need float bags on the boat. Okay?
Nice. We get the pump on.
Okay, as soon as
Get the pump over.
So I think our priority right now is getting float bags on the boat. So
Float bag.
where the float bags?
We've got the float bag. Float bag.
Dusty, can we just get float bags as quick as we can?
What's your name?
Float
Float bags. Come on, let's guys. Port side, starboard side hatches open. Let's go with the dive bottles.
Get off the audio. Everybody get off the audio.
Can we just get float bags as quick as we can?
Essentially, the boat was dead. So with that, we were trying to tow, and then it was taking a lot of time because the boat was not watertight anymore due to the damage. The boat was literally sinking.
There should be more bags. There should be another one underneath there. Just watch the whisk and everything.
Tighten it a little bit, and then just keep pumping everything. So you copy?
Might need some lifting straps. Watch your hand.
The team did an incredible job. In the first half hour, I thought for sure the boat was going to sink. You know, when we started putting the airbags on the top of the mast so we could find the boat, that's an indication of what's taking place. And you can't give enough thanks to the local police and the local fire and the local authorities for their quick response. Huge thanks to Team New Zealand, to Ineos and to Luna Rossa for coming out and supporting us. You know, it was truly a full team effort.
It all happened so fast. Like you're aware of the risks in that maneuver, and we got through the first half, and it kind of felt like we were under control. We didn't quite get through the power zone fast enough, which is always going to be the case when it's that windy. I think what we can take away is how well the boat was going. We were ripping in that last race. Everybody brought it all back together. We've had a tough couple of days, and we all came together. We were having a great race, and that's what we've got to look to: get the boat back on the water, get it all back in one piece, and go and do what we're here to do. We've all been sailing really well today. We need to get back into it, and just hopefully they can weave some magic in the shed this next week or so.
Yeah, calm. I can't see. Look, it's either that king or that king is bent. Oh, that's just bent. Is it bent? Yeah, I think it's just bent, broken. I don't think it's actually any indication.
You know, obviously, not exactly the end of the day that we wanted, but you know, the boat was going really well today, and it's, you know, I can't help but think it's a sign of things to come when we get her back out there. But what an incredible effort by everybody in this room to get the boat back to the dock. Time and time again, when you look at our history for the last 3 years, all we've done is answered the question whenever it got hard. We just kind of keep chipping along at it. You know, our greatest strength in this whole regatta is everybody in this room. So if we rely on each other and we back each other and we support each other, we won't go wrong. So let's not give in to that because of this, because this can be fixed. You know, we have the skill in this room to do that, and you know, we should just do what we have to do to get it done, because it's going to make for one hell of a story.
First of all, let's start with overall parameters of the campaign on the American Magic program.
Yeah, we spent about 4 years. Basically, June of 2017 was when we started, you know, working on it and the discussions of it, and sitting here today, it's still going on. So we're still trying to keep it all going forward.
So when did you start with the twin skin mainsail?
We started with that on the Mule. So, you know, the Mule basically was a great platform for the AC75. So we could develop a lot of the ideas with the Mule and straight away into the AC75. Again, that boat was invaluable for our progression all the way through both Defiant and Patriot.
In the 87 Cup, Ian Murray on Kookaburra started putting cameras right below the spreaders to look at sail shape and begin to analyze what was going on with sail shape. Talk about the use of performance-oriented cameras on your boats.
Yeah, we had a lot of jib cameras, and we chose a couple different pathways there. We used fiber optics through the sails in various spots to help measure the cambers and to help identify some of those flying shapes, because you're using both the windward skin and the leeward skin. And I think what you would do is you would get shapes that felt good, and then you would run them through the CFD and see what that would tell you about the drive force that you're getting out of those flying shapes.
For those viewers who don't know what he meant by CFD, computational fluid dynamics are a computational way to measure, analyze, and iteratively monitor the changes in performance.
Well put.
Talk about the difference of the weather foil shape on the main and the leeward foil shape with these twin skin sails.
In very simple terms, the windward side's flatter than the leeward side. And I think, when you're going downwind in particular, the differential between the two skins, the sail being inflated is important because it creates driving force, and how that all works together. Keeping the skins from being stuck together is important because it's just loss in driving force. So again, very simply, the windward skin's flatter, the leeward skin's fuller.
So a couple more wrap-up questions on the metrics. How much battery power did the boat have?
So we carried 2 batteries inside the yacht. Depending on how much was going on, you get up to about 2 hours of battery life.
And what about how much metrics in terms of horsepower you were generating with the crew? How are you measuring that?
We would do it in watts, basically over the course of the campaign. The Brits prioritized grinding forward with less grinders, but always in forward. We had, myself and Sicho, who were a bit smaller, a bit older, and we were grinding in reverse. So we prioritized, the real strength of the grinders, at least opposite of myself and Sicho, were always going in the forward position. I think what you saw is each boat at any given time used all the power and all the resource that they had. And yet, when I look back at it, I don't remember times, certainly in the racing, where you were hearing, we need more oil here. It always felt like it was being managed reasonably well.
So on the fateful day when the boat's about to flip, what moment in that rounding did you say to yourself, oh, wait a second, I think we can actually crash, flip?
Yeah, I mean, Dean say we were losing the rudder, and I thought, when he said we're losing the rudder, but I mean, you're pretty far through the maneuver at that point. When the boat capsized, obviously we had a hole in it. The 4 of us on the port side of the boat, straight away we're underwater a lot more than what it should be. And that's no more complicated because the boat had the hole in it and the boat was sinking down around that hole. In the past, when we practice these things, so we've done a fair amount of in the water training underneath chase boats, really trying to disorient yourself as best as you possibly could, because as I quickly learned, all the training in the world didn't matter. I made a couple mistakes early on in the piece. When I heard Dean say that we're losing the rudder, straight away I went for my knife. I should have gone for my air, and that was a mistake. So we ended up with the guys on the port side with the boat sinking a bit, very pinned under by the mainsail. And Tim was the first one to get clear, and then Sicho and Cooper. Cooper was opposite of me. And I think between both Cooper and I, we struggled a little bit to get out of our clips. And I was fortunate that as Sicho went by, he could see that I was struggling and that I was pinned in the water by my harness. And he got Cooper, and I was in a very compromised spot. And I was fortunate that, as we had been taught, that everybody does a buddy count and they make sure they got their buddy and they got their opposite. As Cooper and Sicho went by, I can hear him. Even sitting here today, I can hear him saying, Cooper, we got to get Terry. He's trapped. And he's right. And Cooper, had just finished cutting himself out and still had his knife in his hand, and basically was able to cut my port lashing and cut me out of the boat. So then they grabbed me and dragged me out from underneath the mainsail. And from there, we got on to righting the boat. When you think about these situations, I think the most learning happens in hindsight. And I'm fortunate that we were able to get everybody off the water back to the shed safely and properly debrief it. We went into the pool the next day and spent a couple hours as a team, reminding ourselves what we'd just learned, and reminding ourselves, once you got the spare air in your mouth, you're good. And, to go through that process. And as much as we had ingrained it in ourselves, if I had to do it all over again, I'd set my life jacket up differently. I'm right-handed, and my natural instinct was to go for the upper left hand, using my dominant hand to go for something. And I went for my knife instead of my air. And literally the air was 1.5 inches away from my mouth. And I never thought to put it in my mouth. Whether you're racing, cruising, or whatever it is you're doing, make sure if you have a good plan for when worst case scenario happens, and you drill yourself a bit on it, because that's the only way you're going to be comfortable in that situation.
So now you get buoyancy under the boat, you keep it from sinking in 100 feet of water, you get it back into the shed. Talk a little bit about the immense challenge. All of a sudden now you're stopped on the water learning about making the boat go faster and optimizing performance. Now you got a new challenge. All of a sudden you as a leader got to figure out, how do I quickly get my horse back out of the shed onto the race course?
Yeah, that was very easy because we had great people. And so we just had to rely on those people to do their jobs. And, that it was what happened in 9 days. When we built Patriot, it was about 8 weeks of wiring and connections and everything that has to happen inside the boat. So we had to pull the foil cant system out of the boat. We had a backup inside Defiant that had just been serviced. So complete replace the foil cant system. Every wire, every connector got pulled out of the boat, was checked, serviced, and replaced if it was faulty, and rewired the boat. And then on the 10th day, the Wednesday before the semifinals, we went out and went sailing again. And it was truly a monumental effort. I think, as I said in the video, we had a lot of support from Team New Zealand in particular, where their boat building squad was just winding down. So the timing of that worked out perfectly. They were able to build the rounded flat panel for us. That allowed our team really to focus on preparing the hull for the repair, and then allow the electronic side of the team the opportunity to rebuild the heartbeat of the boat.
So most sailors are used to thinking about sail controls with lines wrapped around winches, and even power winches these days. Describe instead the sail control console 75s are using.
Yeah, well, Goody had his little Xbox, which basically controlled outhaul, traveler, Cunningham, main sheet, and twist.
Describe the size of it.
Oh, it's just a little Xbox controller. Walk right into any
Best Buy.
Yeah, any Best Buy, exactly. I mean, this was custom made and it was 3D printed to be light, but it's the same exact thing. And so, we had obviously the jib on a sheet. I think as the rule evolves, that'll probably, all those features will become just, the jib will become hydraulic and will be a continuous self-tacking track, which is a good step in the right direction.
Most people are used to, on boats, this sort of chatter between a main trimmer and jib trimmer and the helmsman and tactician stuff. Talk a little bit about the chatter between the foiler, the helmsman, and you guys. Talk a little bit about what he'll be talking about. Coming out of attack, for instance.
The beauty of it is there really wasn't really required a lot of discussion, and everything exactly was preset. And so when we did a maneuver, Dean and Goody knew where everything was landing because we had practiced it, and be it in a virtual world or in real time, previous to the racing. So you always knew exactly where everything was going to go to.
You go to the presets coming out of the attack and so on.
Yeah, and then as the boat speed builds, you move the cant around that speed build. And Andrew was so diligent and so good at his job, you knew that he was on top of it and that the boat was always being trimmed in the proper way.
For those who aren't familiar with this technology, based upon how fast the boat is going, he would change the angle of lift or flatness of the foils as you go through the water, just like a water skier starts like this and he gets flatter as he builds speed.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I would look at it as an airplane wing. When you take off, the wing is really full. There's a lot of camber in the wing, and once you're up and flying, the flaps come in and the lifting surface gets flatter because it doesn't need as much lift. It's the same here.
How are the jib leads moving during the race as you come out?
In and out and up and down. And Goody could control that with some of his functions. And then obviously the jib trimmer had it as well, where, if you get hit by a puff and Goody was going to drop the traveler down, he could also drop the jib lead at the same time.
And so he would round out the shape of the foils just like everybody else, but he's doing it effectively like remote control. Was this now wired or wireless, the controller?
No, it was wired to the boat.
Wired to the boat. What about any exploration of wireless? Any need for that?
Yeah, I'd have to go back to the rule. I'm not sure it's 100% legal. And you better make sure your wireless connection is perfect. In the end, we ended up hardwiring some of the displays and stuff to the boat because the wireless wasn't reliable. And when you're out on a race course with 2,000 power boats and everybody has their cell phone up and running, the connectivity is a big deal.
So last thoughts on the excitement about doing another campaign on the same platform. This is a great decision, really, to basically have multiple cup cycles with the same platform.
I mean, the boat is awesome. In AC36, I think across the board from our principals through the team, you could see the strengths and weaknesses. The team was very, very strong in all disciplines. And probably the weakness is that we were relatively new together. So we need to make sure that going forward that we're all centrally located. We're kind of through that startup phase. We've built a lot of infrastructure, and we have chase boats, tents, all the stuff and the components that you need to quickly launch an AC75 and go sailing. So, that can't be underestimated. I think, right now we hear rumors about Alinghi coming in to join the game, and, they have a reasonable amount of infrastructure, but I don't know what they have carryover from 2007. And truly, this is a completely different beast. I'm sure they have things from the catamaran in 2010 that can be applied here, but it's an impressive amount of gear. And it's certainly not one of those things, if you were considering that you were going to just start this up and go, you better have a lot, because it takes a lot, and the boats need to be respected. I think the mule taught us very early on going into this regatta. There was Dean Barker, Pete Burling, Nathan Outeridge, Paul Goodison, Ben Ainsley, Tom Slingsby, Jimmy Spithill, and then Bruni developed his skills. So there were 8 people in the world that had experience in the AC50s. And, the carry on into how these boats are raced, it's not something that you can just step into. So I think that's the other impressive side of it, in which you feel really good about, is that, from an American Magic perspective, knowing that the class rule is going to probably change and there's going to be less people on the boat, I'm comfortable that we've developed the Dan Morrises of the world, and the Trevor Birds and Andrew Campbell and Mac Ignatius. I mean, these guys are great sailors. And so we've really done a good job there of developing our baseline. And then you start complementing it with Caleb Payne and sailors of that skill set. I mean, it's, you very quickly, you can get excited and energized because it's going to be that there's a real potential there. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but I also respect the fact that it is a lot of resource to do it properly. Having the goal to win the regatta, I think the other takeaway that I learned in this one is that we did a lot of things really, really well. It gets a bit overshadowed by the fact that we sank the boat. And in some ways, the fact that we righted the boat, we got the boat back to the dock, and we sailed the boat again. It was such a monumental moment for that team, because had the team been weak, we wouldn't have survived that. We would have folded up our tent and gone home. And it was, that's something that, I know I measure ourselves by the wins and the losses on the race course, but in this particular experience, it was good to see how the team responded to that. And I think that's a true testament of Hap and Doug and Roger and the New York Yacht Club.
What are the milestones between here right now and making the yes decision to play in 37?
Understanding where the venue is a big one. And then understanding a realistic regatta winning budget. If you enter a regatta like this and you're willing to take on the challenge, there's a couple different ways to win the regatta. And, I think my responsibility there is to make sure that whatever plan we put forward to Hap and Doug and hopefully Mr. Penske, it's a regatta winning plan. Now, it doesn't mean that we do it in the same way, and we have to be very smart about what we've learned from these past experiences. We have to be smart by looking at our competition and seeing where they were strong and how they developed. You can learn a lot just by watching those guys. And occasionally too, you just need to have a couple things go your way. And we had one big one go against us. And so, we have to stay true to the cause and not be afraid to just keep working away at it.
Naming the practice platform the Mule was a gracious tip of the hat to the Penske organization and to the amazing, engineering legacy and power of him as a partner.
I mean, it's Roger Penske. The guy's a legend. The guy is an absolute legend. He's incredibly smart. When you walk into the team headquarters down in North Carolina, the first thing you see is the wall of people that have worked inside his organization for 10, 15, 20, and 25 years. And there happens to be the Daytona 500 trophy and maybe a couple other
those
trophies on display when you walk in. First message that you get is it's about the people. But that's kind of how Roger is. I mean, that's what you see. He'll be the first one to say that he doesn't have a lot of experience sailing, but he has a lot of experience winning. Having been involved on one of his teams here, it's a simple matter of not saying anything and listen, because you know he's going to be more right than he's going to be wrong.
Yeah, back in the black collar days, he used to say at one point, no more GD meetings. We need to get out, race the doggone boat, find out if this squished ellipsoid underneath the bottom of our US 61 first power rotor boat in America's Cup. You want to see if it's going to work. I need to hit a few hay bales before I believe in this, because we'll learn a lot with each of these big mistakes. You guys went through that experience in space. Talk about how your team got tougher by going through, flipping the boat as you did in the competition.
I think the team responded exactly how we thought we would respond. There wasn't a person in the room that for a moment didn't think we were going to go out and go racing again. I was standing next to the boat with Kurt Jordan, who's your neighbor over there in Tiburon. And Kurt said, Terry, this is a big repair. I said, yep, I know, Kurt, but I also know that you're the smartest guy I know in structure world, and I know you'll figure it out, and you know what the target is. So let's keep it real and do what we need to do to get Patriot back out on the water. Nobody wavered. Nobody said we can't do this. There was none of that. There was just a simple matter of, okay, this is what we're going to do today. And we just continued through it. And every third day, Silvio and a few of the engineers would update the entire team at lunch about what we were doing. You just went about it. And now we have the basis of information of 4 years of working on an AC75, developing a mule, developing Defiant, developing Patriot, developing the virtual platform to go forward. There's value in there that I'm very comfortable that we set a great baseline, but the measure is still pretty strong. In Team New Zealand, where we are at right now is where Team New Zealand was at in 2013.
Right,
so
right.
We got some work to do, and we just can't be afraid to do it.
And you are way ahead of where you were 4 years ago. Surviving the flip and putting the boat together in 9 days, that was an incredible, tough learning experience.
Yeah.
You basically came back from the edge. It was a courageous, technically challenging event that all of America was watching, and we were rooting for you, and we're rooting for you again with your next program, mate. Good luck on the decision and the milestones between here and a go or no-go decision for 37. But you have got a lot of support from the States.
Thank you.
So with that, thanks very much for joining the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon. You've been a thoughtful and intriguing guest, Terry. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
This has been a presentation of the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon.